Cutzler YMX uses the Netradyne two-way camera system in all of our power units. The Netradyne cameras have more than once exonerated a driver who was perceived to be at fault, as well as saved our Cutzler YMX from paying damages related to an accident. We are already seeing, just in 1 year of Netradyne, the impact of better safety scores and fewer damages and incidents in our insurance rates.
To this week's Freightonomics. Zach Strickland, head of market intelligence. Tony Mulvey, again, I don't know,
senior analyst
of something. Welcome in this Thursday. Earnings season underway. 2Q. I find it so far to be relatively uneventful, but I think there's some small takeaways, and also we have. We're going to have a special guest to talk about the ROI of safety.
Yeah.
Adam Kahn from Netradyne, our sponsor, our glorious sponsor.
Yeah.
So also we've got a lot of ongoing, this coverage of like liability in the industry. Like the liability tends to be, in my mind, a headwind for a lot of these. Obviously it is a headwind. I mean to say it's a barrier to entry.
Yes.
And it's one that's invisible to most people that are looking to get into the trucking networks.
Yeah, I mean, you don't think about it. I mean, you go and you say invisible because it's not a problem until it is a problem, and then typically it becomes a extremely large problem. I mean, we'll talk about it here in a little while, but like you look at Knight-Swift's earnings, yeah, they missed earnings because of a claim from 2020. I mean, you're talking. I mean, these are big sums, and yeah, they're always like these for the publicly traded companies. Like they're always one-offs. Like they're like, this is not going to be recurring, things like that. But it seems like it's not that they're not recurring; it's that they do happen regularly, though, right? So it's like
it's so easy to go and file a lawsuit against a trucking company.
Yeah,
and that's part of it. But the regulations are very biased towards, controlling, safety.
Yes.
And so therefore you're always going to be kind of like burdened with this escalated sense of liability as a carrier. So we'll talk more about that. But first off, why don't we talk about and thank our sponsor real quick?
Yeah. So thank you, Netradyne. So remove the guesswork from driver management and fleet safety and start predicting your accident reduction cost savings. Netradyne's AI-enabled video safety platform corrects unsafe driving habits, recognizing and reinforcing great driving. With the Green Zone score, your fleet of engaged drivers will protect your bottom line. Every 50 points earned is a 14% cut to your accident rate. So kind of goes right in line with what we were just saying. Yeah. Driver safety impacts the bottom line fairly significantly, especially if you can cut out those big accidents.
Yeah, I mean, liability is only going higher. The nuclear verdicts and things like that are getting more frequent. So let's go ahead and kick it off with a market in 2.
Yeah, Zach, if you're ready, we'll count you in here in 3, 2, 1.
All right, let's kick it off with the outbound tender rejection index. For you carriers out there, the market is showing that slow sign of turning. Rejection rates not all the way back down to where they were prior to in May. We're having some stickiness here above 4%, which I think is, for if the transportation service providers, a positive sign. In July, we kind of thought, or I thought, that it would actually follow that 2019 line, which you see there in orange, but it's holding on a little bit higher. I don't think that it's necessarily significantly higher by any means. But yes, heading into August, it looks like we're probably going to kind of plane out at a slightly higher level. I think that's a fair gameplay to expect for the rest of the month. Let's go to the next one and look at outbound tender volume index. Just put this in context. That yellow line up there, that's pandemic era 2021. We are still a long way away from that. The white line, of course, represents demand from this year, and the blue line, the light blue line, is last year. So demand levels are increasing, whether you know it or not. There's still plenty of trucks out there capable of handling it, but demand dynamics look very, very strong or stable at this point in time. Let's go to the next one. Talk about some spot rates, excluding that fuel cost. Spot rates coming down out of the holiday period. Again, a little bit higher and slower to fall than we somewhat expected them to be. And in 2019, spot rates collapsed after the holiday. And in this year, we're slowly crawling back down, which is totally seasonal and expected. Nothing to see here really, other than I think we're actually seeing signs that this market has shifted to a slightly tighter space, and we are turning a corner somewhat. Let's go to the last one here and talk about demand once again. This is our IOTI, the Inbound Ocean TU's volume index, measuring all that import volume coming in. Maritime peak season looks to have hit in July. A lot of that freight has yet to hit the coast and the port. So still, demand side dynamics looking pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the key takeaway when you look at that last chart that you had, that Inbound Ocean TU volume index, we're talking record kind of port activity, quite strong, especially on the West Coast right now. And that's before most of these goods hit the U.S. I mean, you're going to see arguably strong port activity at these West Coast ports in, well, with July numbers, but then August and probably September as well. So, I mean, you're talking eventually it's got to flow into the market. And then you get to the back half of the year and November, and they're starting, tariff risk and the like.
You may see a decent peak season is headed our way.
Yeah, and I think you're actually setting up for the ocean market to kind of hold up in a period where it typically lulls, which is that fourth quarter. Given there's some risk involved in trying to front run things.
It's too late to bring it into the country at that point. So real quick, before we bring Adam on and talk to him, I want to hit a couple of stories because I think these are relevant setups for what our discussion is going to center around. Knight-Swift earnings came in below expectations, but only 3 cents off guidance. I don't think there's any big warning signs here. Year-over-year comps are tough due to the fact that they acquired U.S. Express, but man, it looks like they've got that under control. A 97 OR compared to a 92 from a year before, but U.S. Express, again, was not necessarily in a good spot when they purchased them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key takeaway when I look at this, you look at the truckload, you look at what they're attributed in U.S. Express at break even in the second quarter.
Yeah. Compared
to where it was a year ago, that is quite the improvement.
Doing all right.
And so I take that as management's gotten in there, and there's the moves that they're making with that business are definitely starting to show up.
Yep.
And it kind of sets them up for when the market does turn.
Looks
it's going to be quite beneficial. They arguably bought at the right time, whereas if you look at Heartland's acquisitions and the drag that it's had, maybe not
Different
the right
story.
time,
Different
right? So it's like the timing of acquisitions definitely is showing up and having impacts to.
I mentioned a 3 cent off guidance. You know how they would have hit it if they didn't have the 6 cent hit from a $12.5 million dollar settlement auto liability.
Yeah. 12.5 million in 2020. So I mean,
6 cents. They would have hit it with 3, and 6 cents hit it. So
and I think that just highlights kind of the lead in here to bringing Adam on, that liability and the ROI on safety is pertinent and quite important to these fleets, whether large or small.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and bring Adam on. Adam Kahn, Chief Strategy Officer at Netradyne. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, good day. Thank you for having me on the call here.
Oh yeah, we're glad to have you. So let's get things kicked off here. The first question that I have for you, Adam, and of course, please elaborate and explain about your company and what Netradyne does. But I would love to hear your take on, we've been talking about ROI, return on investment, and safety. I would love to hear your take on what this means in terms of fleet management. Obviously, you guys are very focused here. How do you feel like you guys can explain what safety means to the bottom line?
Yeah, it's an interesting lead-in that you had about the cost of the accident. And, as I connect that to ROI, my background, I've probably been about 25 years in transportation safety. And what I've seen is that, the plaintiff attack or the plaintiff strategy against a commercial trucking company has definitely changed over the years. And, And I also think that has motivated the ROI to change also. So if I rewind the clock 10 years ago, the big justification that a fleet had was to understand, hey, I got into a crash. Can I show you what happened? And a lot of the cases that was, there was a settlement, there was a verdict that was assessed or some kind of negotiation. And that really was the only conversation that was happening. And now fast forward to today, the accident is really just the start of the conversation, because the exploration now becomes, hey, I want to examine your safety culture. And so when you start talking about an ROI around an accident and an ROI around a safety culture, I think those are fundamentally different things, because one of the things that you really need to focus on now is connectiveness and engagement with a driver versus just proving what happened. And so when you talk about an ROI today, it definitely brings in the driver into that model, because part of the return on investment and the results that you get are directly correlated to how much your drivers believe in the program and they're engaged in the program. And the only way that I've seen that really get good traction on that is where, you're transparent with the driver, and you also recognize the driver's total driving performance, versus not what they're doing wrong, but why not build into that what they're doing right? Because the moment that you can actually see a driver in the hallway and your interaction's a high five versus a kick in the pants, you're going to get different results on your fleet. So when we talk about return on investment and investing in technology, we definitely focus on how do I bring the driver into that conversation versus using the driver just as a number. So I think that's the first takeaway, that a lot of fleets, when they think about, how do I invest in technology? How do I get better? How do I remove bad habits? There's this new wave of, you have to do it through the driver versus using the driver just as a number.
I think that's a great point. I guess the question would be, how do you get the driver engaged, or how do you get that driver buy-in? I mean, what are the ways to do that you've seen be successful?
Yeah, so let's use the numbers game. A driver that drives 100,000 miles a year, if you break that down, that's about 500 minutes of driving per day. I don't know why I know that math, but 80,000 is 400 minutes, 60,000 is 300 minutes. But if someone's really interested in the math, we can talk offline. But let's just use that 500 minutes. just trust me on the 500. But 500 minutes is quite a bit of time, right? So most systems that I've been involved with, and I can't fault anyone, because at the time of you buy safety systems, it was right for that time. But most systems that I've been experienced with, above and beyond, now with the exception of DriverEye and Netradyne, only look at the minutes of the activities where the driver is not doing something right. And that's a fraction of the time. Like we're talking about less than 1% of the time where the driver maybe loses focus, has a difficult driving experience, and has to, make some tough decisions. Why not have your model based on all 500 minutes, right? So at the end of the day, there's two components that you can really highlight that traditionally haven't been served. One is confirmation of good driving. And confirmation of good driving allows every conversation with your driver to start off with a positive, right? So, I'm 55 years old, and I've been conditioned, if my boss says, got a minute, let's step into the conference room, my brain goes to the first thought of, what did I do wrong, right? So you really have to kind of change that attitude to say, hey, I'm going to tell you what you did right. We're going to work on getting even better. And then on top of that, I'm going to tell you why it matters to the company, right? So those are important conversations that have to happen. But so knowing the compliant factor of how many minutes that in that 500 that you're actually, driving at speed, you got good following distance, you're not touching your cell phone. You're stopping at stop signs. You're, at a stale yellow. You're actually stopping in the intersection versus, hoping it doesn't switch to red when you go through the intersection. So all those, if I can confirm good driving, that's the first element that I think really allows for a very positive engagement. One of the things that Driver Eye does, which is really interesting, is we capture those golden moments where a driver, might be in the right-hand lane at speed, has 3.5, 4 seconds of following distance, and then all of a sudden someone cuts them off. And in that case where the driver actually recognizes the risk around the vehicle, maybe comes off the throttle a little bit, doesn't lose their gear, and creates space, we actually can collect those events. We call those driver stars. And we're seeing just an explosion of driver stars because not only are we looking at where the fleet makes these spot decisions, but we're looking at longevity of driving. So a driver star also might manifest where, hey, I just looked at your last 2,000 hours of driving and you didn't pick up your cell phone one time. I'm going to recognize that great change of behavior. So I think in those two additives really have changed the game in terms of getting drivers engaged and wanting to participate in the business model versus having to participate in the business model, right? That's a different emotional connection to, what fleets are trying to do.
Yeah, I love that mentality of, it's not just about recognizing the bad, it's about recognizing what you're doing well. I kind of liken it to the strategy. I've heard some of the nutritionists say like, hey, instead of focusing on cutting out the bad stuff out of your diet, why don't you also make a priority on eating the right thing, which is also important. You could eat like 15 candy bars a day, and that's not healthy. We all know that. But recognizing that you did well by having a carrot too is also a good, it's kind of like that whole psychological thing. I'm a psych guy. So I like the whole reward punishment trade-off there as well. So I would kind of ask this question, and it's kind of a similar question to what we kind of led off with, but I'd kind of like to role play here a little bit because what we're talking about is an investment in, driver safety, improvement, behaviors, and things like that. It's kind of a risk management situation that we're talking about. And that's something that a lot of companies and businesses, especially transportation, carriers deal with, and when they have limited budgets. How do you get around this whole? It's kind of a soft return. You're talking about investing in something that may not show up overtly or directly on their income statement. We talked about Night Swift. We can clearly see some potential return there. But how do you get through this initialized? Maybe the carrier's like, hey, we're doing fine. How do you, kind of tell them your story about how, hey, yeah, you're doing fine today, but this can show up later. How do you get through that conversation?
Well, it's definitely a, you talk about operating ratios and, in the high 90s, right? So, our customer community is they don't have 20, 30 people sitting around waiting just to, wait for an assignment. Everyone's hustling, at a fleet. And so if you think about the older model of engaging your drivers, you might have a quarterly safety meeting, you might have a monthly safety meeting. And that was good, right? That was the ask. And if you can demonstrate, hey, we talked with our drivers and we do newsletters and we coach face to face, and all that is very resource intensive. But fleets have done a wonderful job of making do with what they have. If the new ask, so the new ask now with the aggressive plaintiff attorney is that, hey, talking to a driver every 90 days is not good enough, and I'm going to convince the jury that, now you're negligent. Maybe the new ask is I got to talk to that driver every day or every hour. And that becomes problematic. And so that's where I think technology steps in. Like for an example, and I could probably lay down a bunch of jargon, and I'm not gonna, right? So,
right.
I like, when someone talks about, they say AI and machine learning and vision detection and edge computing. All those words sound really impressive, but really what you want to get to is the act now, talk later mentality, right? Can the system figure out what the driver is doing, correct it as quickly as possible, and then next time you see the driver, talk about it, right? And so I think there's this pivot where technology is going to be a stronger resource than it has before, because it's going to help for detection of events and then recommended coaching to the driver within seconds of something happening, versus if you and I was your driver manager and you were driving your route and you're working hard and you're doing everything on time, but you run a stop sign, right? So you just missed it, and it happens. In the old model, if I caught up with you a week later and said, "Hey, you remember on the July 10th at 10 o'clock that stop sign you ran? We need to talk about that." Well, that was 15 days ago, and who knows if you remember if you ran that stop sign enough. So the impact of change really reduces with time. So where technology steps in and things like in-cab notifications, or the system says, "Hey, you're driving too fast, slow down," or we detected that you have a cell phone next to your ear, please put that down, right? So these are all act now, talk later kind of mentalities. And the best thing about in-cab coaching is that it's frictionless, right? So it allows the driver to either I heard the command, I might change my action now, or I might change it after 3 times being told or 4 times being told. But I'm also allowing me, the driver, to take control of that change, versus sitting in an uncomfortable conference room with somebody reading off a sheet of paper telling me all the things that I may or may have done right or wrong. That has a lot of friction. And unfortunately, those conversations result in cases where drivers walk away, and people wonder why they have to go hire new drivers. Some of that, removing that friction has a double-edged sword of benefit, where one is the driver can actually absorb it immediately, and two, you're actually optimizing your operations about touching more drivers than waiting for that face-to-face. So I do think technology has a significant play here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I'm hearing this is simply, it's almost like you're required to make this investment in technology at this point. I mean, especially with the burden of proof, increasing liability situations. It's not, it's kind of like the smartphone back in the day. Now it's just a way of life, and I think that's really what I'm hearing here. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. Give a quick read on how to reach out and get in touch with you, or anybody at Netradyne if they want to hear more about what you guys do.
Yeah, so you're free to email me. It's adam.kahn@netradyne.com. Our website is netradyne.com. Great information on there. There's lots of options to click a button, fill out a form for people to come answer your questions. A lot of great information there. I think the big takeaway is that as you invest in technology, everyone wants to reduce and optimize that bottom line. But I think the opportunity that, I really see is that the more that you lean into the advocacy for the driver versus using them as a punitive object, you'll go faster with your investment, right? So if you have everyone on the team who's focused on the goal versus part of the team telling everyone else what they need to do, if everyone really believes in what you're doing, I think you get there faster. And the carrot is always stronger than the stick in this case to motivate people to be on the same page.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Adam, and talk to you soon. All right. Well,
All right.
I mean, the interesting thing here, like, I think I love the whole mentality around the reinforcing the positive and what works.
Because you do it from the time it's what from the time you're a child, right? I mean, I remember kindergarten, right? You go and do something good, and you had a star, or you got a green card like a card that said you get to get something out of the toy chest on a Friday, right? Versus, hey, you did something not good, flip your card to red, and now you don't get anything, or things like that. It's just been ingrained in our human behavior from the time we're so small that,
And
I think a lot of times there is that nervousness that comes with, oh, I know I'm getting reprimanded versus, hey, like,
also, this is an objective source.
Yeah.
This is not something that's come from, I know the driver relationship and the driver manager situation is very tenuous at times. And so a lot of these objective feedback sources from technology, they can fill those roles for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to deal with it. And again, Night Swift, 6-cent hit. I mean, investing in risk management and technology is a requirement of today's life. The lawyers are getting larger, people. There's more of them.
I mean, we've talked about insurance going up. Well, this is one way to kind of take some back into your own hands.
Exactly. So be safe out there, and
We'll see you next week.
yeah.